Thank you for listening to Caleb vs. Self. Today I get a chance to speak with Jesse the Hassel Diaz, amateur MMA and Muay Thai fighter, as well as podcaster out of Los Baños, California. We cover how he decided to make the jump to pursue his passion of fighting and podcasting. He talks a lot about his path, especially in fighting with Coach Amber Pope, and how people like John Hurney really inspired and motivated him. You can find him on his podcast, on Instagram, and on YouTube at The Hassel of Hair. Again, a fantastic conversation. Had a ton of fun with this. Hopefully you guys enjoy as well. So, Jesse, first and foremost, I appreciate you hopping on. Right now I'm talking to Jesse the Hassel Diaz. You can find him on Instagram, YouTube, as well as his podcast, The Hassel of Hair.
Yes.
So, first and foremost, I'm going to start with, why the Hassel of Hair?
That's a common question. Because we're an inspiration podcast. My nickname is the Hassel, and my dream is to become a pro fighter one day. I'm amateur right now, and my wife's dream is to open up her own mobile salon. So she wants to open up a salon, and my nickname's the Hassel, so we call it the Hassel of Hair.
I like it. And the one thing that I really appreciate a lot of your content that you've been doing is you and your wife, Kel, the way you guys interact about your relationship and how open you guys are is really interesting. Do you feel like by doing those with her, have you learned a lot more about you and her as far as your relationship and about each other?
Yeah, we've always been really open with each other, but I think because of the podcast, our communication has gotten way better, way better. It's just you have to be able to do a podcast. You have to keep on talking and be open at the same time. So we're really open, and there's some things that I didn't know about my wife until podcasting.
Well, I know on one of the podcasts you guys did not too long ago, she had talked a little bit about her not being comfortable on camera and not minding doing the podcast with you. And I think at one point she said, like, I just don't want to fight about it. I'm just going to do it. Did that ever come back up, like, after you're done recording? Do you have that conversation again? Like, yo, what?
Good? we have that conversation. We don't fight about it, but we bicker about it. And because my thing is, I want to do everything I can to promote our story, right? And she is the most. I'm an open book, and she's a closed book. When we first started doing this, it took her everything just to do the audio side. And now that we're on video, and we're, I think, 20 episodes on video, or somewhere around that, she's getting more comfortable, but she still doesn't like the video side.
No, okay.
But the reason why I want to show her on video and her story, it's because she has an incredible story that's worth showing and telling, and I feel like a lot of women could relate with her.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of what you're trying to do with the podcast is really be able to tell stories. That's really the goal here, right?
Yes.
And when you're telling those stories, what's interesting to me is watching, on the video side at least, watching you reacting to different things and being able to kind of do a little bit of self-reflecting, which is really cool. And the one thing I'll point out, like, it was with Tony Hernandez, when you were talking about coaching and training, right? And he's talking about how that's impacted him. And I can see it with you. Like, you take a minute and you're like, yeah, wow, that's done a lot for me too. Would you mind expanding a little bit more as far as like coaching and training in, I think it's Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? That you're coaching in?
Yes. I coach the MMA class at Strike Fitness, and I also I'm an assistant coach there for Muay Thai, and it's a Muay Thai based gym. And I recently started coaching this year. I've been training for, I believe, 8 to 9 years now, and I've been training in everything. So, but I really fell in love with Muay Thai, and Muay Thai is the first martial art that I started coaching, and it just, not only did it help me with my my training and my skill set, it helped me figure out people. Because when you're doing one-on-ones with people, you start to get into their mental health, you start to get into their psyche, because if you want to push somebody, you have to break them down, right? They break
Mhm.
down and then you build them back up. That's what my coach did with me. I first came to her and she broke me down. She I thought I was a fighter, and she literally said, "Okay, we'll see if you're a fighter," and just broke me down with training and finding me sparring partners, and then when I broke down, she built me back up.
That's fascinating. Just because from the perspective of what you do on your podcast as well, it's very similar, right? So do you apply like some of those coaching techniques that you learned from your coach into obviously coaching, but into your podcast as well, like breaking people down, getting them to kind of open up a little bit?
It's crazy that you say that. um I One thing I realized when I first started doing the podcast, and a lot of my guests were my friends, and I I noticed when they would come in, they were uncomfortable, and I they've been to my house, they they visited my house before, they hung out with me. I didn't think they were going to be uncomfortable. They're my friends,
Right.
and I started taking I started really thinking about it and diving into it, that when you're interviewing somebody, they have to feel comfortable. So something as simple as having the water and drinks ready for them, instead of having to go get it and go to your refrigerator. Well, my my studio is in my house, but
Mhm.
go to the refrigerator, go get them stuff that wasn't prepared. If you have everything prepared for them, they will feel so comfortable, and then that's when they start breaking down, and that's when they start opening up. And you're right, you made me realize that I did bring the coaching to podcasting, and thanks for that.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. I mean, it's something that again, I listen to a lot of the Tiny Hernandez there. Hopefully I
Yeah,
said that right, right?
yeah.
When you guys were talking about his military experience and then getting into MMA and coaching, like you really see kind of that transition with you, like your body language, even like you're kind of opening up and kind of understanding things as you go along, which brings me to my next question, right? With this whole podcast deal, you quit your job, you're pursuing your dream, you're going after it. At this point in the game, what do you feel like are kind of like the lowlights and the highlights of going through this whole, right, building that podcast audience and grinding through all these things?
I think we'll start off with the I guess the lows, right?
Sure.
um the hardest part about this is learning. When I first started this, I had the area where I wanted to start my studio, and it was in my living room.
Hmm.
And if you actually look at my Instagram, there was nothing. We just had a white table, and I told my wife, I go, I really want to start a podcast. And she just looked at me like I was crazy. Everybody, my sister and my sister-in-law live with us inside my house, our
Hmm.
house, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. Like, how are you gonna do that? And then I slowly just built up everything. I learned how to do audio. I figured out what I needed, how to get guests on. Um, and when I first started doing audio, I didn't know anything about it. It was so hard. I was staying up until like not even sleeping. There was a point I think in May where I just wasn't sleeping. I looked crazy because I really wanted to figure this all out. And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm comfortable with everything now, and I want to just build up my guests. And I
Yeah.
think learning was sorry, I think I went off track,
No,
but
you're good.
I think learning everything was the hardest part, and knowing that the people around you just think you're crazy. Like they don't see your vision. They finding making people see your vision is probably the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah. You're 100% correct about that. Like dead nuts, right on the nail. What I found interesting too is that when you were talking about your studio, like how you're trying to build it, piece things together, you were talking to your wife Cal at one point in one of your podcasts, and you were like, "I just want things perfect now." Like, I just want to get it done. I just want it to be where I want it to be. How have you like been able to temper those expectations as you've gone through this process? Because I'm sure, right, going through the struggles of figuring out audio, getting the backdrop, getting the umbrella lights, finally getting all the things that you want, like you've had to be pretty patient. So how do you kind of temper those expectations?
I don't temper them.
Fair
I
enough.
it's my wife. My wife really, she goes through it with me because I'm always asking her, "Is this good enough? Is this good enough? Am I doing enough? Is it working? Do you think it sounds good?" And there's times where she just tells me, "Look, you just need to relax and just be confident. Be confident that it's gonna work." So my mind has always the there's a reason why I quit my job when I was 28 and I went after fighting. For amateur fighting, not even pro fighting. It's just
Right.
I'm crazy. I admit that I'm crazy, right? I get addicted to things really fast. If I love them, I want to go all in on them.
Yeah.
And I think with everybody with their passions, when you're going after them, you want them for people to say, "Man, that's an awesome project. You're doing great in your passion." And I don't want it to fail, you know?
Hmm. Well, it's yeah. I like how and when I first started diving into the podcast and watching your content, really getting a sense of like who you are, what I found interesting and what I felt like was from the earlier podcasts to where you are now. Obviously, quitting your job and making that transition, and everybody telling you like, bro, maybe you're a little crazy for doing this. What I appreciate the fact is that it seems like you're so comfortable with who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. What is it that you feel like sparks that or sparked I should say that thought of like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to grind as hard as I can because this is what I love to do.
Um, it's I when I was 15, my mom, I seen my mom die in a car accident, and that right there, when you see death in front of you, it it changes your mindset throughout your whole. I was 15, and it changes your mindset throughout your whole entire life. And I did have some bumps in the journey I was in when I was in my 20s. I'm 30 now, but when I was in my early 20s, there were times where I was going away from my passions, going away from my dreams. But in the back of my head, it was always, you could die at any moment. My mom was 39. She was at the she was honestly finally getting into finding her dream. And that was working with autistic kids and being a special ed teacher. And I honestly, I didn't even realize that dreams connected with my mom until I'm talking to you right now. um,
Sure.
but it just it in the back of your head, after you see death like that, in the back of your head throughout the rest of your life, you're always telling yourself, you could die at any second, and life does will not stop if you die. So
Right.
make it worthwhile. Like I've seen people come, because we live in Los Banos, California. That's
Hmm.
about 2 hours. I mean, about an hour and a half from a big city called San Jose, and there it's a commuter town. You see people their whole entire life commute an hour and a half to work and an hour and a half back. Oh, not even an hour and a half back from work because of traffic. It's like 3 hours. So they're spending their whole entire life working. Every Monday through Friday is 12, 14-hour days of just working, and then going home, getting something to eat, going to bed, waking up early again, and then going back to work. And I've seen people do that for years, and nothing came out of it, right?
Yeah.
Nothing. And
W-
they just withered away, and then they die. And nothing. It's sad to say, and it's kind of raw, but I don't want that for my life. You know,
Is
I want something fruitful.
right. Is that like that headspace you were in when you decided to quit your job? Was that when you were doing the FedEx thing?
Yes, I was working for FedEx, and what I just explained about other people, I was doing. Me and my wife were doing,
Right.
and I was super depressed, and I just knew because I had that same feeling in the back of my head. I need I need to do something with my life. I can't waste it. And listening to people's stories when you're working at FedEx, because I was working 12 hours a day, not 12 hours a day, but commuting. The whole trip was probably like 12 to 14 hours a day from commuting to going to work and then commuting back. And in 12 to 14 hours, you could listen to a lot of podcasts, right?
Right.
A lot of podcasts, a lot of books, and it's those podcasts kept on telling me, those books kept on telling me, because I like listening to a lot of coaches books, a lot of biography books about inspirational people, and a lot of those people were just saying, you just got to do it, you just got to do it, you just got to do it. And one day, um actually, it didn't happen just like one day. I quit my job. We had some difficulties with my daughter dealing with because we were constantly gone. My daughter was dealing with some bullying, some stuff at school, and she wasn't okay because we were constantly gone. So one of us had to quit, and I had found fighting, and that's when I decided to quit my job, and ever since then, it's just been milestone after milestone.
It's crazy. Again, like I feel like I keep saying that it's crazy when I'm talking to you, but to think that like okay, you looked at this perspective of people driving, 12-hour, 14-hour days, driving 3 hours a day just to go to work and come back. They're this is life for them. And you decide, no, I'm going to go fight. I'm going to go get kicked in the head or punched in the head or get, you know what I mean, get
Yeah.
into fighting. Most people would look at you and be like, bro, you have the mental illness, not us. You know,
Yeah.
like you're
That
28 years old. What are you doing getting punched in the head?
Yeah, that
It's
is
just,
true.
it's hilarious, just to kind of look at that perspective of what truly is, you know, sad. Like, is it more sad to pursue your dreams? And if that dream is to go and fight and potentially, you know what I mean? Get seriously hurt. If that's a dream, that's a dream. And whatever makes you happy, makes you happy. But it sure isn't driving 3 hours a day, working 12, 14 hours,
Yeah, and
there's no way.
it's funny because I'm after when 2020s hit, and in March there was exactly no fighting because my last fight was in February. Throughout this whole entire year, I'm realizing fighting wasn't my dream. I mean, it was a passion of mine, but it wasn't my dream,
Hmm.
right? I figured out because I've always felt like I wasn't smart enough to do things, so that's why I went into fighting. But because I went to pursue fighting and coaching and martial arts, I realized I'm a uh, I still tell myself I'm not that smart, but I'm an intelligent person to be doing all these things, and that I could do whatever I want. And my before I graduated high school, I always told my grandma at the time I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted sorry, I wanted to be a sports analyst. I wanted to broadcast. I wanted to be a journalist, and I'm finding that love again. And I'm actually going back to school. I'm pursuing the podcast. I'm really diving into the whole world of communications, and that's my dream, to one day have a big show. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like you're really fully embracing that. I think at one point in one of your podcasts, you were also talking about like sometimes that, today, now, when I wake up, I don't know what is Jesse gonna do today. What am I gonna find? What am I gonna do? Like, whereas, a year or two ago, you knew what you were doing. You were driving, you were dropping off packages, you were doing that hustle, and then you were going to sleep and doing it again the next day. Hearing that like level of joy when you were talking about that, like really clicked. Like, okay, this guy, it might not be perfect, right? You might not get the fights right now because of COVID, and the podcast originally, like the audio was tough, but you grinded through, and it seems like you're really embracing, right, doing all this, and you're having fun with it, which I think is the most important part.
Yeah, it's really fun. And if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't be working this hard on it. You know?
Right, right. So let's talk about your last fight. At least I think this was your last fight. That was versus Patrick Holden, right?
That was my second to last fight.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I couldn't find the other one then because I
that
was
it,
trying. I found that fight and then the fight you were in, I think it was 2018 with
oh,
559 fights.
five, yeah, 559 fights. That was actually in a mall. Yeah, that fight. I didn't meet my coach. I didn't meet my coach yet, and I
So
had
how
just
so how did you find yourself in the ring in the middle of a mall without your coach?
so it wasn't. So I had quit my job, and I told myself I just need to find a MMA gym. So I
Right.
looked up MMA, and actually, I did not quit my job yet. I found an MMA gym, and I started training at this hole in the wall gym. And the people were nice. They were good people, but I'm sorry. The number one thing about martial artists, to tell a martial artist that's starting off, find a good gym. And the gym I went to wasn't a good gym. And they said, hey, like 2 3 months afterwards, they're like, hey, you want to fight? And that was my whole goal, was to fight. So I said, yeah, but I had no skill set. I did jujitsu for years. I was a blue belt, and it wasn't the time for me to fight. And they threw me into, they said, there's fights in Hanford, California. Uh and they're at a mall, and I'm like, no way. And sure enough, we get there, and it's at a mall in a food court, and the locker room was McDonald's. And and I won that fight. But if you watch that fight, it it was like, it wasn't a fight. I was a
Right.
fat dude, and I went over there, grabbed him, put him on the fence, threw him down, and then he tapped out. I think he gave up because he didn't know ground game, but he said he popped his shoulder. So, but
Yeah. I saw him pointing to that, but when I was watching the fight, at least from the angle, and obviously, right, this isn't perfect camera, work, but it looked like as soon as you dropped knees on his thighs, he was done.
yeah.
That's what it looked like to me. And then as soon as you took him down, he was like, okay, I'm in over my head with this guy.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And I don't know that, even though I won that fight, I realized I need to find a good coach. And it's going full circle. I was listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan and Kieran Fitzgibbons and Dreamkiller Bolanos. They're from CSA in Dublin, California, which is not that far from where I live. And they were talking about Muay Thai. And sure enough, my I come home, my wife says, "Hey, there's this new gym. I think they're doing Muay Thai." I was listening to that podcast and recently, and she had told me about Muay Thai, so it all connected. I was like, "Oh, Muay Thai, the podcast with Karen Fitzgibbons. I'm gonna go check out that gym." Ends up being a woman coach, and I'm like, I don't know. Just my chismo, my macho man's, I guess, that my ego I had before,
Sure.
and and then I started training with her, and she was really technical. She was really technical, and it was a smaller gym at that time. It was called Strike Fitness, still called Strike Fitness,
Hmm.
and then she tells me, "Hey, we're going to my old. This is the first week I was there. You're a fighter. If you want to fight, I'm going to my old gym in Dublin. It's CSA." And I was, CSA. Where do I know that from? And it's sure enough, it's Kieran Fitzgibbons and Dreamkiller Bolanos is where they train at, or Kieran has a gym there. And then I go over there, I'm like, holy crap. I was just listening to the podcast with Joe Rogan, and there's Dreamkiller Bolanos, there's Kieran Fitzgibbons, there's all these pro fighters. And there's me from Little Los Banos, California. And my coach is all right, go. Uh, they start off with running 3 miles, and we ran 3 miles. And then when you get back from those 3 miles, and it's crazy because I get there, and I love fighting. I'm a huge fighting nerd. S- Uh, most I don't think most fighters are, or like when it comes to being a fanboy. I don't think most fighters are fanboys. I'm a fanboy at heart. I
Okay.
love a fighting. Right, I will go crazy when I see professional fighters. So
Sure.
I get there, and they're like, go run 3 miles, and sure enough, in the front is Josh Emmett. And I don't know if you don't know who Josh Emmett is, go look him up. He's a UFC fighter. At the time, I think he was ranked third in the world in one 155s, and I was like, holy crap! and I'm out of shape. I'm just a dad at the time, and we go and run 3 miles. I'm like, and after the 3 miles, I was done. I was then they tell us, all right, start jumping rope. And I'm like, jumping rope? We just worked out, and we jump rope for about 15 minutes, and then after the jumping rope, we started doing partner drills, and that's partner drills are basically when you're doing Muay Thai. It's drills set up. It's almost like sparring, but you know what's coming at you, right?
Okay.
And you're just going back and forth. We did about 3-4 rounds of that, so that's about 15 minutes, and then we finally get to the sparring, and I was done. I was cramping up. I was drained. I was sweating like crazy, and that's when I started breaking down. I was going with fighters, and finally my coach puts me with the guy named John Hurney. He's a professional fighter, um, big guy, and he taught me a lesson that day. I was tired. I was breathing really really hard. I was ready to give up, but at the same time I was going hard, and I was throwing hard. And when you do Muay Thai, they don't go hard. They don't throw. No one tries to knock each other out in the sparring, in the gym, right? And I was throwing haymakers. I was trying to knock him out because I was tired and I was inexperienced. And
Right.
he was just patting me to the head, patting me to the stomach, moving around, and he whooped my ass without even hitting me hard. Sorry for cussing. And I broke down. I on the verge of tears because I really wanted to fight. I quit my job. You know what I mean? I quit my
Right.
job, and and I'm like, this is not for me. I'm an idiot. And and but he really taught me a lesson. If I want to do anything, I have to go after it 100%. That means I need to get my cardio up. I need to get my partner drills up. I need to start working. And that's when I knew, all right, I'm going to stay with Coach Amber. I'm going to stay with her. And she told after that, we were at Chick-fil-A. She told me, if you really want to fight, this is the way to do it. We're gonna train. We're gonna do all the little sparring events. They're like technical sparring matches. They're not
Sure.
fighting, and we're gonna do all those. And I did like 20 matches, and I did all those. And then finally, a year later, I fought, and it just. I'll always credit John Hurney for helping me out, not with just with fighting, but with life. And
Right.
if you look at my YouTube page, we actually did a travel show with him, and he's opening up his own gym now, not that's separate from CSA, called the Resistance, and it's a really cool gym. Go check it out. But he's the reason why I'm changed, like one of the reasons why I'm changing my whole entire life.
That one you're talking about, the resistance there, that's when John Hurney was doing like an outdoor event. I think he's talking to you and he's like, man, every week I thought nobody was going to show up. That's him. That's who you're talking about there, right?
Yes,
Wow.
that's him, and he that's what I we did the travel show. I want to start going to find people, going and finding people's stories of just going after it. And he only had one pro fight, but he was a world champion amateur fighter, and he wasn't the best of fighters. Like you're not going to hear his name all over the world,
Sure.
but he was the most respected. And it's different. It's different to be respected as a martial artist by other people. He was the most respected, and when people needed a place to train, he made a outdoor park sparring, outdoor drills, right?
Hmm.
And he really he really found a passion in trying to start his own gym. And he recently just, I didn't know at the time that he was going to do open up his own gym. It was after the interview when he told me he was going to open it up, and I was like, man, I got a story now. And
Right.
and he ended up opening up the Resistance not too long ago.
That's really cool. And I like the travel show. I know there's only, at least from what I've
Two.
seen, two
Yes.
episodes, but you even have a director's cut for the Spanish interview, and I want to kind of guide this into talking about Los Baños, because I feel like and I could be wrong, a lot of this podcast is really repping hard for Los Baños. Is that where you were
Yeah.
born and raised? I mean, that seems like your city, but is
No,
that where you set roots? Is that where you've always been?
I grew up in San Jose,
Okay.
East Side San Jose, not the best of areas, and I'm learning that as I get older. You don't realize you live in the ghetto until you're out of the ghetto. Um,
Right.
and and I moved to Los Baños when me and my wife uh, started commuting. I mean, got a job at FedEx. We needed somewhere. San Jose is just too expensive. It's crazy
Yeah.
expensive, and Los Baños had cheap rent and cheap housing, and we ended up buying later. But sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good. We're talking about your
Los
transition
Baños,
over to Los Baños.
yeah, Los Baños. When you're fighting, the city better support you, because if you don't have your city's support, then it's hard, right? Because no
What do
one's
you
gonna
mean by city support? That's interesting. I've never heard that before. What does that mean?
like say you have a fight. If no one's
Mhm.
going, then it's kind of sucks, you know.
Oh, I got
Or
you. Okay.
if no one's supporting you, or and you don't have their support, and you're like with sponsorships, with especially in a small town. Uh, it
You got to put butts in seats. That's what
Yes,
you're right.
that
That's the ultimate goal.
yeah, and they don't have to, like, for amateur fighting, you don't have to, but it's always better to have a support, a group, a community around you when you're fighting, right? And I'm I was one of the only fighters at the time, right? And Los Baños is really small. It's not a big fight community out here, and what the support that I got from them was amazing. And so it made me love this city. It really did. All the people that are here, they went to my fight. Everybody that was at the gym went to my fight, supported me. The kids supported me. The I had three or four sponsors from Los Baños that supported me, and it made me love the city because of fighting. I fell in love with the city. So when COVID hit, it really it really hurt me, because the I
Yeah.
seen people struggling, the small businesses, and a lot of them weren't computer savvy. A lot of them weren't social media savvy. So I'm trying to build this thing where to show them, you because before the podcast, I was doing Strike Small Business Saturdays. I was just making videos on Instagram, supporting local businesses, go support them. I first started off with the pizza parlor, then I went to an ice cream spot, and the ice cream spot where I went to the ice cream spot, stood in front of there, and just told their story that they opened during quarantine. They didn't know
Mhm.
quarantine was going to happen. They opened during quarantine, and then people heard that, and on Facebook it just blew up. It just it just kept on getting shared and views and views. I was like, holy crap! I was like, this is working, you know.
Right.
But it
That's
wasn't.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
The one that I like so far that you've done that I've seen at least is the Mavericks one. The voiceover you did for that, even though I think your wife gave you a hard time about that.
Yeah, he actually helped. He actually, my buddy Gabe. So Gabe is one of the reasons why Los Baños is able to market online. He's this 18-year-old kid who loves doing camera work, loves directing, and he just got up during 2020. He hasn't stopped making content for businesses and artists and anybody that needs it. The kid doesn't stop. He's one of the most talented kids out there. He does all my my video stuff for the travel show. He does all my every good picture that I have on my Instagram. It's because of him. And and it's
Well, it's
just
nice to have that, right?
yeah. He's amazing. And not only him, we have music artists that are really popping off right now too. Our Soul and Phantom 100, and we're all this little group in Los Baños. We don't know it, but we're all trying to go after the same thing. My buddy Phantom messaged me the other day. He's all, we're just all trying to, we're all on a mission. We're trying to succeed, and we just got to push. When you're when you're
Yeah.
when you're when you're hurting the most, when you're down and think that you can't do it, that's when you need to push, and that's when you see if you really want it. And I feel like I have this saying, if we grow together, we win together. And that's what I want. I don't want to succeed and not show support for my community. I want to succeed and bring everybody with me. And that's
That's
what I'm
really
trying.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Just through the podcast and through everything that you're doing, it seems like you're building a really, really unique and cool network of people there in Los Baños, and really just trying to show those stories and those businesses, and really get them to take off. And that's really cool, that perspective and what you're trying to do. Um, One thing you mentioned Phantom, and one of the things that was interesting about your conversation with Phantom, at least I believe the last one that you did that I heard, you guys had talked about using marijuana. So here, I'm in New York. I'm in upstate New York. We
Yeah.
don't have legalized marijuana yet, right?
Oh
It's,
man.
I mean, you can get it if you have a medical card, but even here in New York, like the medical card is, you're not. I mean, it's really hard to get. What I found interesting is you talking to him about how that impacted your perspective of yourself, your relationship, and even your fighting in a lot of ways. So I wanted to ask you, what is it specifically? Because you started later in life compared to most people who use it, right? Like 28, 27, 28, something like that.
Yes. So what happened was, well, I smoked a few times before that. It was like rare, maybe
Sure.
5 times from when I was 14 till I was 28, 5 times. And then I got a sponsor who was giving me free marijuana, you know? And I wasn't going to use it, but then I was hurting and I didn't want, because of training, my body was aching and bumps and bruises and
Yeah.
I always tell my wife I don't want to take ibuprofen. I stopped taking ibuprofen when I was younger. I just didn't like it, and it's from listening to podcasts, health podcasts, and especially Joe Rogan, talking about how it messes you up, and I didn't want to risk it, you know,
Yeah.
and
Well, it's
that's
either that or a lot of people you just use alcohol, hard liquor
yeah, hardly.
to numb the pain, you know?
Yeah, and I don't want to do that, and I
Right.
kind of was when I was working full time. I kind of was, and that's when I got the sponsor and I started smoking. I had a pen. They gave me a pen and edibles, and it has relaxed me so much. And I'm not a when COVID first hit, I was doing it like crazy. I just said, you know what, I'm gonna bunker down and I'm just gonna smoke weed every night. And it really opened my eyes to things and it made me comfortable with myself. I can't explain it. It just I'm a very on edge person. I'm always my mind's constantly going. So when I smoke marijuana, it brings me down. It
Right.
stops. It relaxes me. But
So,
on the
so
sorry,
bringing that down, right? Does that allow you to slow down and look at yourself like
big
more
time,
closely?
big time,
Okay.
and big time. The last thing I want is my daughter to come out of her room at night and she sees me in the living room high. So I I only smoke really late at night and right before bed, and it really it helped me reflect on myself because I'm caught my mind with, like you said, it helps you reflect on yourself because your mind's constantly going. It it made me it made me realize how much stuff I was holding in, how much I wasn't loving my wife, how much I wasn't loving my daughter. It's crazy. I was high one night and I realized I was like, man, you never. I was looking at my wife sleep. This sounds weird, right? I was looking at my wife sleep and I told myself, I was like, you never just hug her and tell her that you love her, never, and it's just you're always constantly in motion with all of life's things that you forget to stop and just enjoy the moment, enjoy that you love your family. And I needed that, but at the same time uh I stopped smoking so much. Now it's like maybe 2 times a month
Sure.
because it kind of clouds. it's a good it's a good thing if you need it at the moment to wake up, but then after you woken up and you don't need it anymore, then it kind of clouds your creativity, if that
That's
makes sense.
interesting.
For me, it did. I don't know.
Okay.
That's not for everybody else, but it started. It I wasn't able to work as hard. Does that make sense?
You get
Because
like lethargic.
not lethargic because, like I said, my mind's constantly going. I'm able to work really hard. Now, if I smoke marijuana all day, that it I'm a downer. It brings me down, and I don't work as hard.
Gotcha. So it
So
slows you down a little too much.
yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
that's not for
That's
everybody
interesting.
though. That's just
How
me.
does that impact your fighting? Like, obviously, excuse me, at some point COVID's going to go away,
Yeah.
right? Whether it be the vaccine or whatever happens, eventually you'll be able to fight again. Are
Yes.
there rules specific? Is it to the state? To like how does that work if you're consuming THC and then getting ready for a fight? Can you not do
Oh,
that or how's that
if
work?
if we're talking amateur fighting,
Sure.
because
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. 'Cause that's the
amateur
world you're in right now.
yeah, amateur fighting, I seen a girl who was lit as a mother.
Oh
And
no, for real?
yeah, we were in the back, and I was hitting mitts with my coach, and you could just smell it on her. She was just smiling. Her eyes were low. I'm like, "Holy crap." It was at a Muay Thai fight, and it stunk up the whole because every you have your red corner and your blue corner, and the red corner
Yeah.
goes to one locker room, and the blue corner goes to one locker room. And she was in our locker room, and you could smell it. And sure enough, it's not the best thing to do because she went out there and she was getting punched in the face and laughing.
But I
So,
have to imagine that slows your reflexes down to such a degree that
not. I don't think it slows your reflexes down. I think it enhances
okay.
them. To be honest,
Really?
yeah. You focus. You focus. Your focus is if you're smoking the right strand, right? Your focus
Oh, fair
is
enough.
yeah, your focus is so on point. But it just it, if you're trying to work and do take notes and learn how to podcast, it's not the best. But if you're
No.
trying to fight somebody or if you're trying to stay focused, then it's it's good because yeah.
Okay. I've got two more questions for you. I know you're probably running down on time, but I
No worries.
appreciate all the time you've given me so far. One thing that I noticed in some of your videos is you wear some bomb ass t-shirts. Iron Maiden and Metallica. Are those bands you listen to?
I didn't- you, my wife's gonna laugh if she hears this because her and my daughter always make fun of me like, "What are you wearing?" Are those what was the question again? Sorry. Are those
Are those bands you listen to?
Oh, hell yeah. I love that. I grew up with metal. I grew up with speed metal. I actually love psychobilly, rockabilly. I love all rock. I actually love all music, but metal, rockabilly, all those like genres of music I love. And nobody else in my life like that was around me and my family and my friends, they didn't listen to that. I had to find people that liked it, you know?
Ah,
And,
that's crazy.
yeah, it's just I played football, I played baseball, a lot of them were listening to rap and hip hop, and it's funny because, uh, playing sports I wanted to play sports, but I saw all the potheads or the artists or the people that were into to metal, and I would see them after school walking, going to hang out, going to the liquor store, going to band practice or whatever they're doing after school, and I had to go
Yeah.
to football or baseball. I didn't deep down inside, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go be an artist. I wanted to go be a musician and just do what they're doing. And I learned that later that I love art. I love music.
Well, it seems like in a lot of ways with your fighting, learning Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu and the studying and coaching that you're doing, I mean, I would argue that or martial arts specifically is an art form. Granted, you use it to defend yourself or to, attack someone, but at the end of the day, it's still an art form. Like you still have to have a certain level of awareness of what's going on to really appreciate it as an art form, though.
Oh, 100%. It's not a sport. it's it's not a sport. It's different. It's way different because you could you could have two of the best fighters in the world, and they'll have two exactly different, like two styles that are way different from each other, right? And
Yeah.
like it's just crazy. And they bring their usually like me, I'm a come forward fighter. I like to have my opponents on their heels,
Mhm.
and not like rock'em sock'em robots, and just not with any technical stuff, but I like coming forward,
You're
and
just you're
that
pressing the fight, it looks like, right?
yes, and that's my lifestyle, right? My lifestyle is like, don't stop going, don't stop moving. You're going forward no matter what. And it says a lot about me. And when you see other people fight, it says a lot about them too. You can't get that from baseball. You can't get that from basketball or football, you know? It's a totally different sport.
That's a pretty wild perspective because when you were talking to Tony, you guys were talking about like part of the exercise or part of the, you know, I'm probably mispronouncing, but like the dance, if you will, is breaking down your opponent and how they do what they do, and then being able to right match that up to your style to find the way to win.
Yeah.
That's
And yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm at the point in my martial arts career. I'm an amateur. I'm not a pro, so I don't. It's very hard for me to talk about this and be comfortable because
Sure.
I'm not the best fighter. I'm not. I'm a pro. There's better fighters out there than me, but in my martial arts career, I'm at the point where I'm starting to see things that I didn't see before, and that's with how everything connects. In jujitsu, you want to break their posture. And then I thought stand up was all about just throwing punches like crazy and kicks like crazy, no technical. But I'm learning, and since I've been with coach, that you break someone's posture down, you break their guard down, you break their feet work down, you break their posture down, and that's when you start connecting. That's when you start beating them, right? And
Hmm.
it's such a once you start seeing things at a different level, once you start seeing things that you couldn't see before, that looks so easy when you're watching a fight, the armchair quarterback, they call it, when they're telling them, "Hit him," or "I could do that," or "I could do better." It's no, you can't. Once you start seeing those things, it's so fun. It's so fun to do martial arts and know that there's these little games inside the fight world.
That's again, that's wild to me. Like I would imagine now, like with the knowledge that you're learning at this point, you could probably watch somebody do a fight and I could be sitting right next to you and I could give my opinion, which is probably going to be like, hey, you should have punched more or something to that effect. Whereas you might be like, hey, the thing that I noticed about, I don't know, the clinch, I don't know, I'm making stuff up now, but I feel like that's where you're heading as far as having those conversations and understanding the nuance of what's happening in fights.
Oh, 100%, and that's from coaching. It's not even from training, it's from coaching. It's from breaking down things. It's from doing something I do constantly when I'm sparring or fighting, and then breaking it down, showing somebody how to do it, and then you're able to see it better. And luckily, what I'm gifted with is my sister's a fighter too. She recently found the love of fighting when I started fighting. She's a amateur fighter too. She's 0-1, but that story is crazy. I'll get on it right now. Um,
Please
uh,
do.
but having her here, living with me and watching fights, and her going on the same journey I'm going, it's so awesome because she's at a whole different level. She hasn't been training that long, and to see her progress and progress and progress faster than me. I started late. She's progressing like crazy. She started when she was 23, and she's progressing like crazy. And she thinks that she's doing horrible all the time, but she doesn't see that I see that she's gonna be greater than me. She's probably gonna be one of the top pros, I believe. When she's 30, 31, 32, you're gonna start hearing her name. And so her going back to her amateur debut,
Yeah.
she wasn't supposed to
What
have it.
happened
So someone called coach and told her that we need a girl. It was a 3-day notice fight. We need a girl to be in San Diego in 3 days. Um, and it's for a title fight, and it's in a casino, and it's an amateur title fight, and this is Muay Thai.
there? Okay.
My sister was training for 6 months, and I get a phone call because I'm the assistant coach. My coach likes to run it by me,
Hmm.
and it's my sister, and she tells me, "Hey, Jess, they need a girl, a 115 girl, in San Diego in 3 days for a title fight, and I'm like, what the fuck?
That seems extremely short notice, as
Yes.
well with someone who is only doing it for 6 months. Like, that seems like a lot of pressure.
And that's the thing, there's no pressure because you've only been training for 6 months. Yes, it might be scary, you're fighting another girl who's been training a long time, but
Right.
there's no pressure, right? There's no pressure, because the other girl's been training for a long time. If you lose to her, you're supposed to lose, right?
Gotcha,
Um,
okay. So the true underdog story.
yes, and, so I say yes, my coach says yes, now we tell Isabel, and she was working at the time. And she had to she works as she my sister's story is incredible, but she doesn't like telling it because she's a closed book. But
So she hasn't been on the Hassel Hair yet?
she has there's two,
There's 2, okay.
but you could tell that like it's hard for her to talk about her story because she was 10 years old when she lost my mom, when we
Gotcha.
lost her mom, and she went to continuation school because she was doing bad in school, I guess, and in high school. She graduated from continuation school as the basically I make fun of her. She was the valedictorian of the dummies, and
That's that's
and she
aggressive, man.
and she got a scholarship for a $5,000 scholarship. Um, and she went to community college. She lived with me. She turned 18, moved in with me. Went to community college, transferred to Merced University, graduated with her bachelor's in accounting, and worked as
Wow.
an yeah. So she is so humble. My sister is so humble, and you wouldn't know that she's done all this because she doesn't talk about it as much as I do.
Right.
You know?
Right.
and and so she graduated. She got an accounting and level basically putting in numbers
Yeah.
at a
Like an analyst?
I not an analyst. She would put in like she was do the books. She basically did the books for a business,
Gotcha,
and
gotcha, okay.
she was working there at the time, and she had to call in. My sister never calls in. My sister's a way harder worker than me. She never calls in, and she I goes, "Well, you're gonna have to call in if you want to fight." And so she couldn't even lie. It was the most cringiest thing watching her call, hearing about how she called in, and so she calls in. We I ended up teaching the rest of the classes. I think Friday. They took off Friday to go to San Diego. I taught, stayed back and taught because I'm the only other coach there.
So this is I assume this is Amber going with your sister?
Yes, Coach Amber,
Okay,
and her story
gotcha.
is an incredible story. Check it on the podcast on
For
the Half
sure.
of Hair. um, but but so I stay back. They go. They weigh in, and my sister. There's a picture I'm gonna post today, actually, or yeah, it's hilarious, and I'll send you it. But she's just this dweeb girl at the weigh-ins. She's a nerdy girl. She loves anime. She wears glasses. She's just awkward woman, right?
Okay.
And the other girl's jacked. The other girl is jacked, Jack City, and they're weighing in, and you could just tell they're different. And you wouldn't think my sister would be able to fight. And so I ended up taking off the next day. We get there in San Diego, big casino, and it's for versus uh Muay Thai, I guess, or kickboxing. I'm not really sure what it's called.
Okay.
Um and I start seeing fighters there, Liz Carmouche, and just other Muay Thai fighters that were there that are professional fighters. I'm like, holy crap, my sister's about to fight in this pretty big venue in front of other professional fighters for a title. That's insane. I can't imagine that. She was just doing an accounting job and just graduated from her bachelor's. Like she never thought she would be fighting. And so she gets in there, and for 3 rounds, my sister just came forward nonstop. Just put it like the
Just put it to her, huh?
yeah, she well didn't she my sister ended up losing the fight. she didn't she was coming forward the whole entire time, but she
Mhm.
was getting hit more. Does that make sense? Like, it's exactly what you don't want to do. But the heart that my sister showed that fight for only training 6 months against a girl that's been training for years, well-known amateur fighter, it, it's insane. I'm proud of her. It literally brings me to tears. It's insane. It's
That's really cool,
yeah,
especially uh, for somebody who, like you said, right, was crunching numbers the day before to all of a sudden be, amongst people who are experienced, um, obviously amateur, but just because you're amateur doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing,
yeah,
right? I mean, that sounds like some serious, uh, company she was in for that fight in particular.
yeah. It was it was one of the best moments of 2019, I
Well,
believe.
that's super cool.
Yeah,
Um, Again, I know you're kind of probably short on time, but the last thing I kind of want to get into, and I really thought was really cool, is when you were talking on your podcast with, I believe it was Nativo Gonzalez.
yeah.
You guys were talking about like the experience of podcasting and what it's done for you, and you said that it was like almost like university for you, which I thought was a really cool kind of insight into what it is to podcast and be able to talk to so many different people. For you, if you could pick like a couple of things that you really took home from your podcast that you've been doing, what are the highlight? What are the highlights of that? Like where are those really cool moments that you felt like, man, this is why I did this. This is why I'm putting in all this work.
Actually, it was recently. Um, I haven't aired the episode. It's coming out next Thursday, or I don't know when you're gonna upload this. Sorry. Um,
No,
but
it's okay. Yeah, next Thursday,
yeah,
Hassel a hair. Check out
yeah.
the next episode.
But it's gonna be the last episode of the year, and I recorded with him, I believe last week, and his name's Daniel Barbararsi. He wrote a book called Dueling with Kings, and I listened to this book in 2018, 2009. Yeah, no, yeah, 2018. Right, it was right before I quit to help out my daughter and to pursue my dreams.
Mhm.
And it's about this guy who was a Wall Street Journal journalist. He covered the Yankees, and he started getting into daily fantasy sports. So you basically it's almost like gambling, right? Have you ever played fantasy sports?
I had a long time ago. I could never invest the amount of
Yeah.
time that is required to do that. But I think you had talked about a little bit about this on the episode you did recently with your wife. This is fantasy, like DraftKings, like things like that, right?
Yes. And you basically he was doing hockey, and you make a lineup every day, and you enter it in for the day for hockey, all the games, and you try to get the best score out of everybody that signed up, and you win money. And he entered this world and found out that it wasn't people that were very athletic and into sports. It was a bunch of geeks, a bunch of bros that were just uh they had like I don't want to get into, but they had a thing called scripting bots that would just make a bunch of lineups for the day, like 30, 40 lineups. And the more lineups you have, the better odds you have of winning. So a regular guy like me and you wouldn't be able to win because they have 30, 40, 50 lineups, and we're going off of just the top of our head and making one lineup. So they're going to win every time because we only have, because of just quantity, right? Because they have more quantity. Well, yeah, quantity. And he
And these are
entered.
guys that are probably also like going deep into the analytics, I'm
Yes,
guessing, right?
yes. And most of the analytics were just make as many lineups as you can and see which one wins, you know?
Jeez.
And he went into this world, and he said, I have a story here. He wanted to do it, and his dream was to always become a reporter and an author. And he ended up going to Wall Street Journal, says, I'm going to write a book. They told him, no, you can't do this because a you're basically gambling. We can't have you work for Wall Street Journal and gamble at the same time, a professional gambler. And he's all, well, he talked to his wife and he quit his job, And so he enters this world of daily fantasy, and he goes through this journey of him learning how to do it, and like you go into the book and you see if he succeeds or not, but also talks about how daily fantasy came to be, where because at that time they were fighting in the courts if it was illegal or if it was legal because of gambling. So it was an awesome book. And
What was the name of the book again?
Dueling with Kings.
Dueling with Kings. And this
Yes.
is your podcast. You're coming out with this on Thursday, right? So anybody listening to this, check out Hassel of Hair for that one, because I know I'm gonna check it out. That sounds really fascinating,
Yes.
especially knowing that, like, it sounds like if you play fantasy sports, at least at that time, maybe it's different now, but it sounds like at least then it's kind of like pissing money into the wind.
Yeah. It kind of still is too, if you don't know about it, right?
Right,
The
sure.
regular jock or armchair quarterback is not going to win. And so it's not only just a story about that, it's a story about going after it, right? And I loved that. And he inspired me. He was one of the people that inspired me to just go after it. And I had emailed him because I was stuck in a situation because I ended up getting COVID. I ended up getting COVID about a month ago, and I couldn't interview anybody, right? Because I was having my friends come over, and I couldn't interview anybody, right?
Right.
And so I had to figure things out. I had to figure out Zoom. I had to figure out how to reach out to people. I didn't If I was gonna do Zoom, I didn't want to do my friends. I didn't do my friends. I didn't want to record with my friends because it didn't make any sense. We live like right down the street from each other. So
Yeah,
I
it probably feels very inauthentic to you, right? Since they're your
Yes,
friends, you see them all the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I for about a week I took time off, and I just said, "You know what? I'm going to hustle. I'm going to figure out how to do Zoom, and I'm going to find people around the world." And sure enough, I remembered this book. I was like, "What if I just email the author?" So I emailed Daniel Barbarisi, and 2 weeks later, or 2 days later, he messaged me back, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I told my wife, and my wife was laughing, and she thinks I'm crazy. And he ended up saying that he'll do it, and I was like, "Yes!" And you got to understand, I come from East Side San Jose. I didn't go to college. I I'm barely graduated high school with like a 2.0, and I always feel like I'm dumb. So interviewing somebody that was a Wall Street journalist for the Yankees, is has he's an author and works as an editor for um for the athletic.com,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and and he's has two books coming out. He has another book coming out. I was so intimidated, right? Because I'm like, I'm going to interview this guy that interviews people. Do you know how hard
Right.
that? So I ended up getting on Zoom with him, and that was just a learning experience in its own from the interviewing standpoint, and just knowing that I'm able to do this. When you asked me before, like, what's the
Mhm.
most thing that you learned or the highlight of doing all this, that at the end of the year, working so hard to get here, to do what I'm doing with the podcast and having that interview. I don't care if 2, 3 people listen, but just the fact that I made that happen from when I started going after my dreams because of that book, to now going after my dreams all these years later, and I'm interviewing one of the guys that inspired me. That right there is the highlight. It's crazy.
That's awesome. That
Yeah.
is awesome. Coming full circle, being able to, right, grind away, get to the point you're at. Um, I appreciate all the time that you've given me, Jesse. If you guys are still listening, obviously I'll have this in the intro, but if you want to check out Jesse, Jesse is at on Instagram at Jesse the Hassel Diaz. He's got the Hassel of Hair is his podcast,
Yes.
and the Hassel of Hair on YouTube. If you want to check out any of his work,
And
especially it sounds like next Thursday is going to be the one that blows up, in my opinion, because that sounds really fascinating, and it
yeah.
sounds like you were really into it as well.
It's on we have an Instagram too, the Hassel Fair also.
Okay, perfect as well.
Yeah.
All right, man. I appreciate all the time.
Thank you.
Hopefully,
Thank
for
you,
those
Caleb.
you guys listening, you'll check us out next time. Thanks again, man.
Thank you, Caleb. I appreciate it.